Steve Moore, the founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, joins us now. Hello, Steve. Mr. Steve, are you with us? Oh, his signal is wavering. His commitment. There you are. I hear you just fine now. Hello, Steve. It's good to have you back with us, sir.
Hi. Good to be with you, Vince. And that was music to my ear, what we just heard from Scott Bessent. He understands the whole idea of growth. Growth is the best way to bring down the deficit, and he understands that if you get, that growth rate up to 3%, you'll start bringing the deficit down. But we also have to cut a lot of spending. We don't have a revenue problem right now, though. The revenues are at an all-time high. Yeah. It's all spending, and Bessent made that point today.
Yes, in fact, when I think of government revenues in the modern era, one thing that you and I have discussed before is that when that Trump tax reform went in 2017, the Trump tax cuts, government revenue, the media really never talks about this, but government revenue went up after the tax cuts, which is like, I think literally what Art Laffer has been trying to tell everybody for years. And that never really gets any mention in the media.
No, it doesn't. In fact, if you look at our hotline today, and I know you get that, Vince, every day, we have a chart that shows that the revenues went up by over 100% in the 6 years since we passed that bill in 2017. So it was a Laffer curve effect. We cut the tax rate on our businesses because we had the highest business tax rate in the world when Trump came into office, and we cut those rates, and we got huge amounts of revenues because we have more business. We brought $1 trillion of capital back to the United States as factories and businesses move back here. Same as, all these businesses are moving out of California and New York to places like Texas and Florida because they have no income tax. Right. The same thing happens on an international scale. When we cut our tax rates, the money came back. And what I think people have to understand, one of the most important things that Scott Bessent said today, and it was a reminder, that doing nothing is not an option. Because, Vince, if we do nothing, the average family is going to pay $3,000 a year more in income taxes.
Yes, that's because the Trump tax cuts are set to expire. And this is, let me play. Here's Scott Bessent today saying this is critical in order to avoid what he says would be an economic calamity.
This is the single most important economic issue of the day. This is pass-fail. That if we do not fix these tax cuts, if we do not renew and extend, then we will be facing an economic calamity. And as always, with financial instability, that falls on the middle and working class people.
A lot of the Democrats I heard today, Steve Moore, they have very low IQ assessments of these Trump tax cuts. They say they say things like, oh, well, the rich don't deserve the tax cuts. They should pay higher taxes. But in the end, we just had an election about trying to bring prices down for the American consumer. And the way you do that is you cut their taxes and you don't elevate taxes on the people who produce the goods they buy.
Well, exactly. Well put. You got an A in economics today, my friend. And in fact, what's so interesting about this is that it's happened every time. It happened under Reagan. It happened under JFK. It happened under Calvin Coolidge. Every time we have cut taxes, we've gotten more revenues. This Laffer curve is absolutely true. But don't forget also that you've got to do something about the spending. In just the last 3 months, Vince, the Congressional Budget Office just came out with their new report. They follow the revenues and the spending every month. And, the fiscal year 2025 started on October 1st. So we have the first 3 months of data. We have October, November, and December. And guess what? The deficit in those 3 months was up $200 billion from what it was the previous year in 2024, and 2024 was a record high deficit. So I'm sick and tired of hearing Joe Biden pontificate about how he rescued the economy and how he's leaving Trump with a great economy. No, he is not. We're going to have a huge, huge deficit this year thanks to Bidenomics, and we've got inflation coming back. Look at what's happening in commodity prices. The oil price hit $78 a barrel today. We're headed back to $3.50 a gallon gasoline unless we put in place Trump's pro-energy policies.
Yeah, and just the impact on the American consumer and the American worker has been awful under Biden. They keep crowing about how great it is, but it's not. I mean, as You and I have discussed before, native-born Americans have actually lost jobs in the Biden economy, and people are poorer now than they were when Joe Biden took office.
They are. There's no doubt about that. And by the way, that when I come on your show or do Fox or others, and I say, 21% inflation under Biden, people start yelling at me. Your listeners yell at me, Vince, because they say, no, inflation is a lot higher than that because of things that you have to buy: gasoline, food, eggs. You have to pay your utility bills. You have to, fill up the gas station. And for most Americans, I don't know if you agree with this, Vince, but just anecdotally, people say my personal inflation is more like 25 or 30%.
Yeah, no, inflation is sky high. You can see it. I mean, no matter whether at the grocery store or just in all of the payments, your healthcare payments, everything. It's just everything has exploded in costs, and it falls on the people who have the least amount of money to spend the hardest. So it's bad news, and that's why we're hoping for some answers here. Of course, one of the big lessons that we've learned, quite unfortunately, about how inflation works is that government spending that you were just referring to.
Yeah. Yep.
To what extent have you detected an appetite by President Trump to really tackle that issue? And we heard from Pete Hegseth, for instance, coming in to be the SecDef. He really did talk about some of that waste that's going on at a very big agency, the Pentagon. And how he needs to get that under control. So it does seem like there's some early good signs in terms of cutting spending.
I hope so. But I've been in this town for 40 years. I've go back to the Reagan years, and we get Republicans talk a good game when it comes to cutting spending. But when it actually comes to cutting spending, they wince. And you've already got a lot of Republicans saying, we got to save the green energy programs in the Biden budget, which is the biggest waste of money in all. Why? Because some of the projects in Ohio or, Republican states. So I'll believe it when I see it because I've gotten burned before of Republicans. Oh, yeah, we're going to cut spending. And then they don't do it because they all love to play Santa Claus, whether the Republicans or Democrats. And frankly, look, I'm a big Trump guy. I was one of his economic advisors. I think he was an amazing president. But even Trump himself wasn't a big budget cutter. So I'm hoping that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy can convince Trump and the American people that there's so much waste out there that we can save hundreds of billions of dollars a year without cutting the programs Americans depend on.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, just you've been around long enough to know that the biggies that nobody really wants to tackle in terms of how do we get the spending under control is what do we do about Social Security, which of course has been raided by the federal government for years, people have been sold a false bill of goods. There. What do we do about healthcare expenditures by the federal government? These are areas where politicians pretty uniformly avoid them because they're afraid of the political consequences of saying that, hey, they need to be dealt with in order to make costs, work in the United States.
Yeah. So look, when Trump said, I'm not going to cut Social Security and Medicare, and by the way, I don't think he should. I don't think he should cut the benefits from Social Security and Medicare. But both these programs, especially Medicare, I mean, the fraud in Medicare and Medicaid, hundreds of billions of dollars are being stolen, ripped off. How much money was stolen from the PPP program? How much money was stolen from unemployment insurance, from bogus claims? People, by the way, are we going to continue to write off people's student loans? I don't think so, not under Donald Trump. That's $300 billion right there. I mean, and incidentally, Biden is still in the White House for 3 more days? I can tell you what they're doing right now. They are shaking the sofas, trying to find every single quarter that drops out so they can spend every dime. That's why the budget went up so much in the last 3 months. I mean, it's so incredibly irresponsible.
Well, they're
leaving.
I mean,
I get so angry about it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And this is one of the issues that, Russ Vought, who is the incoming head of the OMB, who is he did that same job in the first administration. He keeps pointing out that the federal government works under a very insane policy, under many insane policies. But when it comes to spending, basically Congress authorizes spending and then says the president has no discretion to save money.
Right.
So if the president says, I want to save money, I don't need to spend that much money, I could do this more, at a cheaper rate, which, by the way, President Trump has an entire career of doing that very thing. He's penalized for that. You can't do that. You can't save the taxpayer money. That's insane, Steve Moore. That's the kind of thing we should change immediately.
You better believe it. And every president from Thomas Jefferson through Richard Nixon had a power called the empowerment power, which Trump wants to bring back. And it meant that the chief executive, which is the president, just like the chief executive of a company. I mean, can you imagine a company CEO saying, well, we authorize this much money and we don't need to spend it, but we're just going to have to spend it all since we authorize. No, of course not. That's not what a company would do. They'd say, oh, this project only cost half of what we expected, so we can save the other half. That's not the way government works. Let me give you an example. Let's say that tomorrow we had an armistice in Ukraine, and that the fighting stopped and the shooting stopped and the killing stopped. We would still have to spend all that money that was allocated to Ukraine, even though that the war is over. How stupid is that?
It's about as dumb as it could possibly get, which is why it makes sense that it's a federal government program. It really is. It really is very crazy. Hey, so how do you envision the economic picture changing beginning Monday?
I'm a little nervous about the economy right now. I mean, I think if you look at it, prices are rising. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. We all hate inflation, and inflation is the enemy of growth. And then you've got these massive deficits that are getting worse and worse in the last months of Biden. So, I think Trump's going to need just a gigantic pooper scooper to fix all the problems that have been left behind, which is why it's laughable that Biden gave that speech yesterday. And may I say, I've lived a long time in politics. That was the most despicable speech I've ever seen. It really was. For him to, it's going to be he's going to be a dictator and this kind of, what kind of farewell speech is that? Really, really awful. And it showed a lack of class. And
it demonstrates what a lie his own inaugural address was, that he would unify the country instead.
I'm going to unify.
Yeah.
No, that was exactly 4 years ago. I'm going to unify the country. Can you point to one thing, Vince, because I can't. One thing that Joe Biden did to unify our country?
Yeah, he made everyone realize what a fraud he is, and so they voted for Trump.
Good answer.
Thank you. Hey, Steve Moore, always great to talk to you, sir.
You too. Good, and happy inauguration week.
Same to you. That's Steve Moore, founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity.